First of all, I just want to thank our hosts again. What a beautiful home. What a beautiful outdoor area here. So it's wonderful to be here with you all. The story that I want to tell you today is it's a tragedy for sure, and I want to tell you the story of how we lost California and how we're losing still California. Because you all remember California was the Golden State. Everybody wanted to move here from around the country, and we've certainly lost something. I think we all know it, and I want to tell you how we got there and how that story really is centered around criminal justice, the criminal justice system, and so-called criminal justice reform. Because you're going to hear those words, if you read the newspapers, if you listen to the television, you're going to hear things like, well, this candidate's really pushing criminal justice reform. But you got to be careful when you hear that. So let me tell the story, give you a little background, little history. Pat Brown was elected governor of California in 1959. And he served 2 terms before he was defeated by future President Reagan. But you may not know this, but Pat Brown, before he was governor, was the district attorney of San Francisco when San Francisco was still a blue-collar, working-class town. And he ran as district attorney, and he beat a long-term incumbent on a slogan, "Keep crime down, vote for Brown." And that was Pat Brown, and that's the father of Jerry Brown, who ends up serving 4 terms as our governor. Why this is all irrelevant to this is that since Jerry Brown was the governor, we've been in the middle of an experiment, and that is really changing the nature of criminal justice, what prosecutors do, what sheriffs and police do. And Jerry Brown tried it the first time he was governor, and they called him Moonbeam for a reason. But he came in and he really started to dismantle the criminal justice, the accountability part of the criminal justice system. And I'll just give you a sense of what he did, some of the changes that he made when he was governor the first time. I'm not talking about the second time. I'll get to that part of the story. But the first time he was governor, we went to an indeterminate sentencing. So if you're convicted of murder in California, you could do 7 years to life in prison. So when I became a prosecutor, I would sometimes get files of people who had previous murder convictions, and they committed more crimes later. It was stunning to me as a prosecutor to say, this person actually was convicted of a murder and only served 8 years in prison. And then they were released because a parole board made a decision that they weren't dangerous anymore. And the problem with that is I talk to the victims and their families, and we try to get justice for people. And the people who've been killed are real people, and those are real losses. And 8 years in prison doesn't do it. It's not justice. For if you've lost a loved one, you lose a child to a horrible murder, go tell the family that that person's going to get 8 years because that's enough. It doesn't. The people aren't satisfied with that. So Jerry Brown, the first time, did all these changes. It really culminated in lessening the effects or the consequences of crime. Of course, you end up with Rosebird as the Supreme Court, and then all of a sudden, the public started to get fed up, and that's why I was interested in your slogan here, "Stand Up." And then Carla sent the flyer out, and it said, "Had enough." Back the first time when Jerry Brown was the governor, the public had enough, and what you saw was spiraling crime out of control. It ended up going into the 1980s, and you had the crack epidemic. You had the gangs going crazy in Los Angeles and killing each other, and the murder rate was through the roof. And the public, after more than a decade of these terrible policies, I'm just going to call them what they are. They're terrible public policies to lessen the consequences of violent crime is dangerous to the public. And you've got people that stand behind those kind of policies, but they put those policies in place. The public got about 10 years of the consequences of those policies, and they just said, we're done. And they threw everybody out. And they started kicking out governors and legislators, and it culminated in Rosebird got kicked out, right? Remember that? And then in 1994, we got 3 strikes. Everybody remembers the 3 strikes law. Well, 3 strikes law came into effect because Holly Klass got murdered by a man who should never have been out. And it wasn't just because of that one case. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. The public was sick and tired of it. Sick and tired of hearing about kids being taken from their homes, trafficked, and murdered. They'd had enough. And so we got together as a people and we put in some new policies. 3 strikes was a culmination. Before 3 strikes, there was a lot of laws that started to ramp up the penalties for using a gun, being in a gang, murder, attempted murder. The penalties started to really stack up. I want this to fly away. The penalties started to stack up, and it had an effect. Now, what happened? Now, I was in law school in 1994 when the 3 strikes law was passed. I get out of law school. I get hired by Grover Trask as a deputy DA. And this is the county I was born in. I came home. I wanted to practice here. Grover ran a great office. He was a great man. Been my mentor now many, many years. But this was a tough on crime office. I wanted to come to that kind of a place. And I came and started in 1997, right at the end of really the 3 strike. Well, 3 strikes comes into effect in 1994. And for the next 10 years or so in the criminal justice system, we were holding criminals accountable. If you used a gun, if you joined a gang, if you committed a violent offense, we sent you to prison for a long time. We used the 3 strikes law. We used other laws, recidivism laws to send people to prison for 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. So what happened? The population of our prison got bigger and bigger. Now, what happened to the crime rate? It plummeted. When I hear talking heads saying, gosh, the crime rate is historically low, we have no idea why. I want to throw something at the television. We know exactly why. We took the worst criminals, the repeat offenders, the gangsters, and we locked them up because that's our job, to protect the innocent, hardworking people of our jurisdiction. We did our job. Now, skip ahead. Jerry Brown comes back like a bad penny that we can't get rid of, and he does it again to us. Jerry Brown says we need to do criminal justice reform. We know what he has in mind, and he starts in 2012 with AB 109, and that starts to change the structure because we're no longer going to send people to prison. We're going to put them in the local jails. And then in 2014, the year I was elected as DA, we got Proposition 47. What did that do? It made all drug possession a misdemeanor. It made theft under $950 a misdemeanor. No matter how many times you did it, you wonder why homelessness has exploded in our state. It's because people who used to have drug addiction problems, they used to end up in jail where at least they had a chance to get help. That's the honest truth. Now they don't have a chance. They're on the streets. We walk by them every day. And we call that compassion. It's far less compassion to do something about the problem that's facing. But that's what's happening to our state. Then in 2016, I believe, we got Proposition 57. And this was Jerry Brown's real baby. Proposition 57, let me back up. When they passed 47, they told the public, don't worry about it. The title on this initiative is called the Safe Schools and Neighborhood Act. Don't you worry about it. We're going to make everything just fine, right? And they said, this only applies to nonviolent offenses. So you don't need to worry. This will never affect murderers and rapists and gangsters. And they were right. But 2 years later, they come with Proposition 57. And that's where they really started to do what they want to do. And that is empty out the prisons and empty out the jails. Okay, and they did. And I want to read you a list of crimes in California. Proposition 57 made the following crimes non-violent crime, which means under their law, people in prison that had been convicted of these crimes could be released early because they are classified as non-violent. Let me read you this list. Human trafficking of a child, abducting a minor for prostitution, rape by intoxication, rape of an unconscious person, drive-by shooting, assault with a firearm, felony domestic violence, felony domestic violence is not violent in California. Try to wrap your head around that. Only in California. Solicitation to commit murder, assault with chemicals, assault by a caregiver on a child under 8 years old that could result in death. I could go on and on. There are more cases like that. And so what have we done in California? We've emptied out our prisons. You know, you're going to hear the charlatans running around talking about mass incarceration. You realize that in California, we have 100,000 people in prison. Sounds like a lot. We're a state of 40 million. No mass incarceration. We're not rounding up innocent people and locking them up. Everybody who's in prison, 91% of the people in our prisons right now are there for violent and serious offenses. So, look, it's been a disaster for the people of this state. When I read, you know, I've been doing this 26 years. It's my life's work. And it's painful to watch it be undone. And eventually my time is going to pass and I'm going to go off and retire or whatever I'm going to do. But as long as I'm here, as long as you give me the honor of being your DA, I'm going to fight against this nonsense. I'm never going to accept it because I've watched too many people get hurt because of these delusions and these utopian fantasies that these politicians have. And I know I run for office. I don't consider myself a politician. I'm your prosecutor. I'm your DA. And I'm going to keep doing the right thing in every single case. And that doesn't mean locking up everybody. It doesn't mean always seeking the maximum. It means doing the right thing, but it also means making sure we're protecting the public. So, you know, we're sitting here today and they have undone virtually all the work that was done previously. And the people of California are suffering. And the legislature every year, you know, we have the elected DAs have a group and we have a legislative committee and they give us an update to all the elected DAs. And I dread that update every year because there's always new craziness, new laws that are coming down. And you just won't believe the harebrained ideas that are coming out of Sacramento. But now there's another thing they're doing. That's the other thing. Now there's another thing they're doing. If that wasn't bad enough, now the radical left essentially is trying to elect DAs and sheriffs that run and promise not to prosecute, not to uphold the law. To actually run and say, if you elect me, I won't uphold the law. I'll basically not file those charges, even if the evidence is there. I'm going to let people out on purpose. And they recently elected George Gascon, who's the district attorney of Los Angeles, and he did just that. He came out on day one and said, these are all the areas of the law that I'm no longer going to prosecute. Guess what they were? Gun crimes, gang crimes, violent crimes. Los Angeles County, I want you to understand this. Los Angeles County, he recently came out with a new directive. He's going to disband the gang prosecution unit in Los Angeles County. In Los Angeles County, where gang central, really the focal point of gang violence in all of Southern California, they're not going to have a gang unit to prosecute those gang members. It is insane. It really is. And we're getting people wanting to come over here to Riverside in droves to work in our office from the LADA's office. So I wish I had a happy ending, but I don't have a happy ending to tell you. I wish, other than in this county, I'm going to enforce the law. I'm going to do the best I can, even with the laws in the state that they are. I'm going to do the best I can for you. The only thing that I think of that is a possible happy ending is that it's not politicians who decide, still even today, it's not the politicians, it's the people, it's you who decide. And you decided to come together here tonight, and I don't think it's about me. In fact, I know it's not about me. I'm the entertainment. But you came together because you've had enough. And that's powerful. Don't ever underestimate that. And pick up the phone and call people and call your local officials. At the local level, you know, we just got a new attorney general today. And he's to the left of Gascon as well. So, you know, things aren't going to get better until you force those in charge to hear your voice. And unfortunately, that's what it's going to take. And it's not going to change on it by itself or just wishing that it would change. The old politics are gone. There's a new politics, and it's not pretty. So I want to take any questions you may have. Maybe you have questions about our office. Yes?
I don't understand the motivation of down these crimes and then people in prison. So what's motivating them to do this?
It's a good question. The question was, what's motivating those that are doing this to our criminal justice system? It's ideology. So if you really want to know where it's coming from, is that our colleges, our educational systems, schools have been taken over by a certain ideology, and our young people are getting pounded in their head that the United States was founded on racism and inequality, and the criminal justice system is, really the mechanism for that inequality and that injustice. And so, they hear that enough, and enough of the public hears that. And I think that folks like Gascon, they really believe this stuff. They believe that, the less you enforce the law, the better it is for society.
It's run the cooling.
Yes, they believe it. I don't think they're cynical, and I don't think they're doing it just to get power. I think they really believe it.
Can you tell also that there's so many illegals and they want the illegals to come because that's who are Democrat voters. So they're going to be easy on the illegals, even if they're criminals, because they know that as soon as one walks through that border, they're going to become criminals.
The question had to do with illegal aliens committing crime, and whether or not that's part of the motivation. It could be. I don't know. I know that in total, I know that what they're proposing is very dangerous for the public. It really is. And everywhere it's been tried, it fails. I mean, has anyone visited San Francisco recently? Right? I mean, right? 20 years ago, I was talking to John. I should introduce. This is John Akey. He's number 2 in the DA's office, and he does a great job running the office. So John and I were talking about, when we were young deputy DAs, and we started together, 25 years ago. If we worked really hard, the office would send us on a training, once a year or something. We all used to love to go to San Francisco for trainings. It's a beautiful city, and you walk around, and it's so exciting. And not anymore. You can't go. You can't walk around. It's crime ridden. There's hypodermic needles on the streets. So it's bad. We're losing our state. Yes.
I'm more concerned about how we find out about all this legislation and bills and things that are coming down the pipe. So we're aware of it before it happens. We always seem to find out about it after it happens. So how do we get ahead of the curve so then we can be making the phone calls and becoming more proactive about that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the answer is our system of government is deeply broken, because here's what they do. There's a process called a gut and amend, and I don't want to get into legislative process, but they'll take a bill and they'll put a bill on the roster, and they'll leave it blank. They'll leave the topic blank, and the day before the deadline, they will take that empty vessel and they'll put in this horrible law, and then they'll ram it through with hardly any debate, and no one has time to even comment on it. Well, that's the reason they do it. They do it so that the public won't know and won't have time to push back. That's the honest truth, because I've asked the same question. We're getting all these horrible bills. Can we get some notice? And I could go up and maybe I could ask to. No, we don't get any notice.
So how do we change that? I mean, how do we get a requirement that they have to fill the wording of the bill so many days, so many months before?
Look, I think you need new legislators. You need a mass of people to elect new legislators that are going to have the people's best interest in mind. That's really the bottom line. Yes.
Can you name some of the things that have changed? You mentioned while you were talking that there was, it sounded like, I don't know if it was just recently, a bunch of stuff was dismantled or changed. Can you name some of that?
So the dismantling, the most recent dismantling started in 2012. and that was AB 109. And what they did is AB 109 was a law passed in Sacramento. And they basically said, AB 109 said that we can no longer send, for a whole host of felonies, can't send people to prison anymore. You can only send them to local jail. So how that has affected Riverside? Well, one of those crimes was car theft. We can't send people to prison anymore for car theft. And so all we can do when someone gets arrested and convicted of a car theft, we can send them to the local jail. Well, our local jail has been full to max capacity for years. So what happens on a car theft? So let's say the defendant has 2 previous car thefts, and my prosecutors go into court, they prosecute them, and they get 2-year, after trial, they get 2-year prison sentence. That prison sentence has to be served in the local jail. So there he goes in the jail, except it's a nonviolent offense. So right now, that person gets kicked out and serves right now about 10 to 12 days on a 2-year sentence. 10 to 12 days. Now ask yourself this question. If you are a criminal, if you're part of a street gang and you steal cars for money, does that dissuade you?
No.
Is that a deterrence to you?
No.
Of course not. Of course not. What would be a deterrence? Something more than that. There's no magic, but something, a year in jail, maybe 2 years in jail, but 10 days. And so it's a joke. And everybody and all the criminals and the criminal element, they know it's a joke. And so what has happened to car theft since 2012? It's up hundreds and hundreds of percentage points. It pays. It pays. Crime pays. You make crime pay and people will do it. So that's one example. AB 109 is one example. And imagine our prosecutors, I get calls all the time from the public. You don't do anything about car theft. And I say, I wish I could. There's not a thing I can do about car theft except keep prosecuting them, keep the revolving door going. But that's a great example of we can't do our basic job because of the laws the way they've changed. And then, add on Proposition 47 and 57, and they've significantly changed and watered down the penalties for crime. And I think what's happening now, though, is now you're starting to see crime go up again. You're seeing the murder rates go up tremendously in the last year. So we'll see. I think the public is going to, I think history will repeat itself. Yes, sir.
What's the chances of the recall of Grassroots actually working?
I don't know.
We did it before.
I don't have a crystal ball. I think it just depends on what happens and who runs and all kinds of moving parts. So I wish I knew. I don't know. I think our governor's in some trouble, but he might survive it. Oh, the DA and Gascon. Yeah, that recall hasn't qualified yet. I think they will qualify it, and then they'll have another election. So I think a lot of people in Los Angeles are saying, when you ran on kind of these vague notions of social justice. Well, who could be against social justice? Nobody's against, nobody should be against any kind of justice, right? By definition. But when he ran on social justice and then stops prosecuting crimes, and people are saying, wait a minute, you didn't tell me that.
Yeah,
right.
Instead of social justice.
So now they're starting to get the dose of reality that comes with a far left progressive prosecutor. And I think they don't like it. You're seeing it. You're seeing people getting up in arms. I can tell you one thing. What happened in Los Angeles has focused people in Riverside very much. I've gotten many calls and letters and emails saying, please don't go anywhere. Don't let this happen here. So, yeah.
D.A. Hestrin, following up on your thoughts of bad legislators, independent law enforcement is one of the bastions of a free society. SB 271, which will allow non-enforcement people, teachers, to run for sheriff.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
This is just a silly law that's designed to help the radical left get into sheriff positions. Because what the barrier that they come up against is they want to get people like Gascon to run for sheriff, but it's hard to find people that would qualify because you have to be under current law. You have to be a police officer. So it's hard to find people that crazy who are police officers that want to run for sheriff. So what they're saying is, well, let's get rid of the minimum qualifications and let anybody run for sheriff. And they don't have to do that for DA because there's a lot of crazy lawyers out there. So,
Can you talk about the assembly bill that I was at Chad Bianco's talk the other day, and he brought up the assembly bill that actually kind of defunds their budget by giving minimum wage to prisoners. I never knew that prisoners got minimum wage for heating up their food and making their beds.
No, they don't. They don't give minimum wage. I think that's
what the bill is for.
That's what the bill is
to
for,
pay them minimum wage to do that.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not as familiar with that. I mean, Chad Bianco is better to speak to that, but I know what Chad said about it, and he's basically saying that it's a roundabout way to defund the police. That they're thinking that instead of defunding his department, they'll make him pay his prisoners because in people that are in custody, they want to work, not surprisingly, right? They want to work. So when they work, he's under this new law, he'd have to pay them minimum wage, and it would be in the millions of dollars. And I don't know how that's going to work out. Yes.
I have a question on trafficking
Yes.
in Riverside. Where do we stand? I've heard that it's quite prolific in Riverside County. Is that
Human trafficking?
Yes.
Yes. So human trafficking is a problem everywhere,
Right.
and it's the fastest growing crime internationally. It's a huge problem, but I don't want to give you the wrong impression. It's all part of the same thing. So human trafficking is a big problem, but so is child exploitation. And it kind of goes hand in hand, right? You have the internet has changed the crime of child exploitation. I mean, when I was a kid, I'm a child of the 70s. My parents said, if someone rolls up in a van offering you candy, don't talk to them. Beware of strangers. And otherwise, my friends and I, we ran free. We rode our bikes everywhere, right?
So sad today they can't.
Right. But what happens now is predators really prey on children online. That's the main area. There's no more vans. Now it's these computers that we carry around in our pockets. And so our children are very vulnerable to it. And unfortunately, we see it all the time. So we just started, our Bureau of Investigation just started a child exploitation unit in Riverside County for the first time. We had done much of the work, but really this unit they're cyber detectives. They're really going after people that use the internet to prey upon children. So a lot of what these individuals do is they groom a child or they'll groom a young woman for trafficking, or they'll groom a child to get them to meet them at a park or somewhere. And so our investigators go online and pose as children, and then they arrest them, obviously, when they go to meet. But, if I could give you a snapshot of how prolific this crime is, you would be overwhelmed. It's thousands and thousands of hits a day that come through. So we're living in tough times.
So is there anything, for instance, Stand Up Riverside can do to get involved, to get the message out? We have a website. Is there something we can put on the website to help people, to give them information?
Yes, the biggest thing you can do, and I think we have something at the DA's office that we can share with you, is educate parents.
Right.
Because parents are under the impression that these are phones. They're not phones, right? This is a gateway to the entire world, and predators use that. So we have to. I mean, law enforcement can't do it alone. We need parents' help, and every parent should know exactly what their children, their grandchildren, their nieces and nephews are doing online. Right? The same way that if somebody came to your door and said, "Hey, I'm a 40-year-old man. I'd like to spend some time with your little niece." Can you imagine but that's what's happening through our phones.
You're right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right. So, other questions? Yes.
So you catch these guys. Then what happens? That's the problem. What's going to happen to them? Are we going to be able to put them away for any length of time?
Right now, yes. Right now, when we catch these guys in Riverside County, they go away for long prison sentences. So, and I don't, look, I tell our prosecutors, when you're talking about rape of a child, prison for as long as you can get. We're not, I'm all about rehabilitation on the lower end. But when you're talking about when you cross that threshold, my mind, we're done. So you need to be put away for a long, long time. So we still can as of right now. So far, Sacramento has been, let me put it this way, even Sacramento is reluctant to change those laws on child predators because I think that they're afraid of what would happen. Yes, sir.
So with getting right to Riverside here with the Robert Presley Detention Center, I've been told that the sheriff's department takes people from other cities, puts them in there. Do you know offhand if they transport them back to the city they came from, and is there plans for another jail somewhere in Riverside County?
Yeah. Yeah. What you're saying is true. The sheriff has to shuffle people around from different jails. And we have multiple jails in Riverside County. They did build a new one out in the desert, the John J. Benoit Center, but it's only partially open. So this year, the sheriff's going to ask for the funding to open it. So that's something you ask what you can do. You can ask your board of supervisors to open the jail. That will help. It'll help. It'll be a step in the right direction. Because right now, the other thing that's happened that you may not know is that during COVID, the state said we're no longer taking any prisoners. So all your prisoners have to stay in your jails. So guess what? Our jails have filled up even more with people that should have been in state prison. So hopefully that part of it will end soon. Other questions I can answer? Yes, sir.
Like, I really don't have a question. I got a statement.
Okay.
You need to be more outspoken on television. You know, we have the Orange County District Attorney sticking up for what's right.
Yeah.
And he did a great job with it. They had the sexual harassment issue, so he backed off. But there's no voice that's stepping up saying, hey, this is what we need to do. Can you please be that voice for us?
I do. I am that voice when I'm called to do it. But I will tell you this. The job of the DA is not to lead a movement and not to be the leader of a movement. Because, my job is to look at cases as they come in and do the right thing each and every time. And I can't do that job and be the leader of a statewide movement. If I'm going to lead a statewide movement, then I got to resign my job and go do that. So I'm not someone who thinks that this job, the DA job, is a good stepping stone for something else. I'm here because I want to do this job.
Well, I'm not getting to that point. I'm involved with a lot of business owners.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody around here knows. Everybody's fleeing to Texas, Montana, Miami, everything else. Okay. If you would allow the people to know that Riverside County doesn't put up with garbage, instead of people moving to Texas, maybe they would get out of North Orange County, which used to be conservative, and say, you know what? We'll move to Riverside County. That's our type of DA, because people are scared right now.
They are. And every time I speak publicly, I say, I am so blessed to be the DA of Riverside County. You know why? Because the people of Riverside County, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, even Democrats in Riverside County, they're more sensible than Democrats elsewhere, right? And they want to be safe. They want to have good communities. Look, I got a lot of Democrats that supported me last time. It's a nonpartisan race. I'm very fortunate. I mean that in all seriousness, to represent you all in this county. And so, absolutely, when I'm in other parts of the state, I sing the praises. Come to Riverside. Don't go to Texas. Don't go to Arizona. We can help you here. Now, the anti-business laws are everywhere, right? All over the state. But, one thing that we took the lead on here in Riverside County was we've gone after those fraudulent ADA lawsuits. And we're going to keep doing that.